what's the point? Well, okay. I suppose right now should be one of those days where I get to talk very serious here. Because today, as you're probably aware of, by this point in time is when my latest feature film project, which I had canceled, delayed, and pretty much held off for a while, Inhospitality, has finally been released to the public. But let's just say that with all that's been happening lately, combined with the fact that I don't necessarily have lots else to comment on at this point, because I feel kind of ashamed to even mention about its existence right now. And there's a few reasons for that. Because today is March 29th, 2021. And 4 days ago was when I had released Inhospitality after a little over a year of pretty much holding it off and all that, before eventually having it delayed twice and then canceled. But soon enough, I managed to find out that I was, in fact, kind of over my head by just simply pulling out projects that are pretty much good ideas and great concepts from the start. And lots of people have actually been giving some good feedback after I had pretty much leaked certain footage out there explaining that there were some projects that I had made within the past several years. And alongside the fact that there were quite a few projects of mine that I had released during this time, it figures that I probably could have gotten something done and released. But the point is, because of how busy I was with Nerf Secret Reveal Bolts of Intrigue, which I had in fact released on January 1st, 2021, I mean, that one seemed to be a pretty big deal. Not only to me, but the fan base that I had developed within Nerf Secret Revealed itself. Because the original series itself is gone. It's been gone since last July, and even then, I already had a lot of good plans for Nerf Secret Revealed itself, other than finishing up Bolts of Intrigue and then finally having it released as my next, well, major motion picture project of mine. And then of course I had the spin-off series, which pretty much continued onwards with the plot that surrounded the film itself after Saw It, which, as you know, took place between October and December 2020, and it basically just continued the plot line from there. I mean, you could probably just basically look up the lore that I have situated behind it, or even better, basically just listen on here. Bolts of Intrigue basically starts out as the 25-minute long short film that I had basically done in August 2019 with the concept of a feature film project that is adapted from Nerf Secret Revealed, which is by far my best web series. And even to this day, it still holds the highest amount of viewership and rewatch value, and also, well, it was also the reason why my channel started getting a lot of subscribers in the first place. But looking at the channel now in its current state, I don't really get why it has not changed. I mean, with the usage of a lot of new content of mine, there really has been tons of new stuff going all over the place. So I see zero reason why there's zero viewership going on. It's just frustrating. Having little to no viewership on any video of mine, let alone thousands of them on the channel, I mean, I just don't really understand that anymore. But in terms of how Nerf Secret Revealed basically went down, it began as far back as 2010. It's just a mere series of concepts of mine that I had to basically have my own web series after I had gotten some inspiration from creators out there like Fred, Miss Oliver and Blossom, and Angry Video Game Nerd, pretty much. So basically speaking, by going into those kind of franchises out there, which had already gotten a lot of popularity over the years, I felt like I could probably have my own shift take place on YouTube itself. When Nerf Secret Revealed first came out, I had no expectations for it. I had no standards for it, so of course, I kind of just let it run as it is. Although these were very crappy projects by today's standards, they somehow held a lot of popularity within themselves. As a matter of fact, looking at the episodes today, there are still hundreds, thousands, and even tens of thousands of views that have surrounded all of them, basically. Especially the majority from seasons 1, 2, and 3. And the years taking place from 2013 to 2016, those were basically the peak level of viewership surrounding the franchise at the time. And of course, the highest view count ever would have to go to episode 17, which surrounds the controversy about the Nerf nuke, and the fact that I had basically leaked out the information shortly after the Nerf nuke was basically teased by ThinkGeek, and apparently I found out that it was just an April Fool's joke. And when I leaked this information out to the world, for all the world to see, I got freaking viral very quickly. I still have a ton of viewership on that video right now, but even though it hasn't been picking up lately, I could just look back at that video and wonder, I made the discovery of a lifetime right there. That was how that video got so popular to begin with. There are still lots of comments surrounding that video that a lot of people have found out about that stuff too. I guess it's probably because the fact that I leaked this stuff out to the internet for the first time, that's probably how I ended up getting a lot of this popularity first. And when other people started talking about it, they probably had something similar to this going on, where they had viral videos surrounding the controversy about it. But from then on out, I could pretty much just look back at that video knowing that back in April and May 2014, those were the times when I simply put made a huge discovery, and that was by far the biggest secret that I had revealed to the entire world. And that's pretty much what Nerf Secret Revealed is all about. But even when it comes to the film adaptations as well as other things surrounding the franchise itself, considering how popular it had managed to get in the last 7 or 8 years, it kind of made sense that even after I would have basically not ended the series, I really would have wanted to put in a feature film project to adapt from the series and basically continue the franchise itself, the story that envelops the series overall. So basically speaking, I really did want to continue the story from here on out, because knowing that the series is now gone pretty much, I figured that would have been just the end of an era, but it wasn't just that. There was also a lot of other things surrounding Nerf Secret Revealed itself that a lot of people were pretty much wanting to find out. But even though I wanted to just shut down the series after a little over 7 years of running on YouTube, I really did want to put in some more time to the franchise overall and basically continue the stories that basically were told over the course of that period of time. So that's why Nerf Secret Revealed Bolts of Intrigue basically came to fruition, and overall the concept being, as far back as the start of 2019, I had basically gotten as much of my time put together on that, and by April and May 2019 was when I decided that I was in fact going to begin production on a feature film project surrounding the story of Nerf Secret Revealed and basically continuing the whole thing overall. So this way, when the series does go down, then at some point in time I will have a feature film out there to adapt from the series and continue the story from where we left off. But the thing is, by the time I actually managed to get what was supposed to be a full-length feature film project out there to the world, this was back in August 2019. And at that time, I had actually announced that I was going to be having an extra 2 seasons for Nerf Secret Revealed itself. So the series would in fact continue on past summer 2019 and all the way to summer of 2020. So that's pretty much what happened then, but I did eventually announce that the series would then be shut down. I would stop airing episodes after July 2020. So August 2020 and onwards would be a time where I would no longer have work on the original Nerf Secret Revealed and instead have other things focusing on the lore behind it. So that's pretty much just another thing out there to get to know about. But by that time, I had actually made a re-released version of the short film project from August 2019 and then released it several months later in May 2020. So I pretty much managed to get back to the public, letting them know that this was in fact not supposed to be just a 25-minute long film of mine, but rather something I wanted to have that pretty much fits the requirements of many motion pictures these days. So what I decided to do is that, well, I decided to take that short film project and just expand on it until I find a suitable length from start to finish that would be fitting enough for me. So from then on out, throughout the remainder of 2020, especially between June and November 2020, I managed to go on ahead and take the re-release version as well and pretty much continue on my production on that until finally January 1st, 2021, after 2 continuous parts of Nerf Secret Reveal Bolts of Intrigue basically being released separately, I combined them both together as well as put in some extra stuff in there. Some bonus footage, a few end credit scenes here and there, and plenty of other things as well. That was the date that I finally managed to put together my latest feature film project, Nerf Secret Reveal Bolts of Intrigue. And when I had released it on the channel, I actually got a lot of people to see it. And from the way it is, it's promising enough to me that I might just get that viewership count that I had before a second time. So I guess a lot more people might start looking back on Nerf Secret Revealed for what it is since day one. So it's promising. That's pretty much all I can say about that. I probably won't expect a lot of viewership to turn up from it from this point going onwards, but the point is, Bolts of Intrigue being my latest feature film project at the time, and also, well, what some people call a good adaptation of Nerf Secret Reveal, considering how its popularity had somewhat been lacking between seasons 5 and 8, pretty much. Those were times where Nerf Secret Revealed started to become pretty much nothing at all, but considering how many people are looking at Bolts of Intrigue right now, how many people I've asked to watch it at least, and give it whatever kind of rating and the like, comments, all that good stuff, I could safely say that I feel like I might be getting some viewership back on it. But for right now, man, that was a long thread right there. I haven't even gotten started talking about what's happened to Inhospitality, which is another feature film project that I pretty much had some similar troubles with. So let's just talk a little bit about that. Back in late 2019, I had basically gotten the concept to make a feature film project surrounding the dangers of, well, the great outdoors during the winter time, whenever your car or truck ends up breaking down in the middle of nowhere and you pretty much have no help from nearby, no Samaritans, no nothing, and you'd have to venture off on your own to find something yourself. That concept basically stems from the fact that I had constantly been told by some of my peers here and there that I'm supposed to bundle up during wintertime, when I've already proven to them how many times that this body of mine is nothing like any other people out there. I was just built to basically withstand cold and heat all day and all night long without any trouble. I've proven to them about that many times, yet I still get told all the time to have a coat, to have pants, to have boots, to have very thick socks, and all that. Gloves, hats, balaclavas and all that. Just because there's cold outside that I can easily hold on to and handle on my own. That's a problem that I seem to face a lot these days, but it brought up a good point in my mind. It eventually got me thinking that one of these days I might have to basically create some sort of feature film project that actually talks about the many things about this exact subject. And that became a project of mine known as Inhospitality, which I began work on through late 2019 and early 2020. But just like what happened with Nerf Secret Reveal Bolts of Intrigue the first time around, Inhospitality was little more than another short film of mine that I had. It was a lot longer than that of Bolts of Intrigue when it first came out in August 2019, with Inhospitality being around 42 minutes in length. That right there was pretty much all I had. Of course, I wasn't done working on it, but because of what's been going on with a lot of things surrounding my work, especially between January and April 2020, those were times where I started to become a lot more busy. Especially because mainline Season 5 of Gaming with Kaiju Force Neo, along with dozens of other things out there that I also had to continue my work on, pretty much had to come up first. At that point, I announced that I would delay the release status of Inhospitality until March 2020, and that way I could also continue my work on that as well, so that way it'd be at a suitable length, pretty much. I was hoping for it to be around 90-95 minutes in length at most. So, that's pretty much just what that's about. But eventually, the time pretty much came, because by March 2020, that's when I pretty much announced that because of all this, for the most part, I would have to cancel Inhospitality's release. Now, to go a little further in detail on that, I did not necessarily say that I would cancel it permanently and I would pretty much scrap everything else surrounding it. I basically just said that until the time's right, again, when I could start continuing my work on it, I would pretty much just have to cancel it until I could pretty much find another time to do so. But at that point in time is where I decided that I wanted to get back to work on Nerf Secret Reveal Bolts of Intrigue. So of course when Bolts of Intrigue came out as another, well, short film pretty much, at 51 minutes instead of just 25, that was basically where I got the inspiration to eventually continue going on with my work on that whole entire thing altogether. It was basically just part 1 re-released back in May 2020. But here, at this day and age, because of how Bolts of Intrigue is now fully finished and the like, that eventually got me clamoring around wanting to now continue my work on Inhospitality, because I almost completely forgot about it. But let's just say that it wasn't just after Bolts of Intrigue where I wanted to continue my work on Inhospitality and then have it released again. It was, in fact, as far back as October of 2020 that I wanted to go ahead and start doing some more work on it. Because it was around that time that it was getting close to a point in time where the winter would start coming over and snow would start pouring down on the roads again. So that pretty much got me thinking that I would want to go ahead and get some more work on that as soon as possible. But however, there were a few problems with that. Of course, I've said earlier that it was another short feature film project of mine, but Inhospitality I wanted to get to around 90-95 minutes in length. So I basically went ahead and did just that. As soon as snow started coming down, I pretty much began my planning on what I was going to do with recording and all that. Basically, the filming portions were probably going to be a lot easier because unlike Bolts of Intrigue, where I pretty much had a lot of outfits to choose from and a lot of time that I pretty much had to wait or pretty much scramble around to get my stuff done as quickly as possible, because of the many things that were surrounding the timeline of Nerf Secret Reveal Bolts of Intrigue, as it does take place between June 2019 and October 2020. So, basically speaking, the timeline surrounding the beginning to end is basically just that. But with Inhospitality, I would not necessarily have to deal with something like that, where I have multiple parts of a timeline to choose from. Instead, if I was going to be doing something like that, where I was going to be transitioning to, well, earlier portions, or some sort of things that would reflect on the past of, well, the main character's life, whom is known by the name of Elias Rumsfeld, whereas in Bolts of Intrigue, I'm just myself. I'm Jay Nowak. Myself, obviously. But this is another occasion of mine where I'm basically an original character, Elias Rumsfeld. And at that point is where it probably will be the last ever time that I might actually portray myself as a main protagonist of any feature film project of mine that I make from this point on. Because starting with the S grade next year, when it's released, that's where I'm pretty much going to draw the line and then have someone else portray themselves as the main protagonist of the films that I have from this point going on. But going back to Inhospitality right now, because, wow, that's quite a while away from its release status in the S grade, but Inhospitality is supposedly going to reflect on the many dangers surrounding the great outdoors during winter when you break down, and as simple of an idea as that is, I actually managed to pretty much milk it for all it was worth. Or at least I tried to do so. Because right now I might as well just address that for what it is, it's not even close to being at 70 to 90 to 95 minutes, pretty much, like I originally planned. Not even close. And I can pretty much tell you why that is, because there are at least 3 issues that revolved around, well, the project's continuous delays and the like. Production had pretty much been rushed most of the time, but occasionally I would actually try to take it slow, so this way I wouldn't continuously rush it and try to mess it up, because I do want these new feature film projects of mine to be released high quality and as professional as possible, because there's pretty much no reason at all to want to basically do sloppy work. There's no reason ever to do sloppy work like that. So I did the best I pretty much could throughout all that time that I had spent with the original production that I had done in Inhospitality, where it was at 42 minutes and long. Then of course I basically did some more production on it as time went on throughout the time that I decided that I was going to get back to work on it after I had canceled it months earlier. So I basically did just that. At the same time that I also managed to pick out a brand new outfit for the character at the time, I pretty much had to get rid of some footage that I had put together. So it went down from 42 minutes to just being around 9. Yeah, 9 minutes. 9 minutes of footage that I had only to work with. So that meant that I had only 80 something minutes left to work on the whole entire thing. But thankfully speaking, there were in fact the tropes that I have continuously used in pretty much all Kaiju Force Neo related media. There's a first person perspective, and there's a lot of shots revolving around that actually, so you'll be seeing that a lot throughout the film itself when you go take a look at it. Next, of course, there was the, well, intro section, which, considered the title screen as well as a montage of cars that simply pass by, is a traditional aspect that I pretty much put on in the beginning of pretty much every feature film project of mine I've had since day one. And then of course there are the credits. You can't really forget that even to this day we have end credit scenes. But here in this day and age is where it became very, very much the focal point for all audiences these days. You can never walk 10 feet away from most movies these days that have end credits, because a lot of people would encourage you to find out what goes on after the credits. And that seems to be a tradition that is much more common in the last few years than it had been back then. So, of course, I had to jump in on the bandwagon. And for the record, this was not the first time that it happened. Like I said, Nerf Secret Reveal Bolts of Intrigue had a few end credit scenes, and there was also A Day in One's Life, which also had its own end credit scene. And at the time, of course, it was only starting to become more relevant, as it was becoming more popular, mostly thanks to things like the Marvel Cinematic Universe, basically showing an obligatory end credit screen to continue the story and also to provide a good cliffhanger as to what could happen next in the next installment of the MCU itself. But a lot of companies have pretty much joined in on that tradition of having an end credit screen of some sort, or a scene of some sort that takes place after the credits. So, in total, between all the films that I've had, end credit screens are starting to become pretty much a priority of mine in all my projects. A Day in One's Life had one, Nerf Secret Reveal Bolts of Intrigue had at least 2 of them, Inhospitality also has one. And it's a pretty lengthy one considering the fact that I had basically tried my best to get as much stuff together, as much material put together as much as I possibly can. But, once again, there are a few key reasons to this, and I feel like I've gotten too far with trying to mention the first one about all this, so I might as well continue on with the other 2 or 3 of them I got. Yeah, 3, I guess, so that's 4 total. So, reason 2 would be the fact that with every new feature film project that I have, I seem to try and find a new car to use, or truck, or type of vehicle to use, because every new installment I've pretty much used different vehicles here and there. With the many things out there that surrounded the many aspects about all of my other projects, with the more recent projects that I had, including A Day in One's Life, Bolts of Intrigue, and this one here, Inhospitality, I have basically been using different cars. Basically trying to get as much of my stuff done as much as possible, but yet use different cars as a way to, well, I guess avoid being lazy for one of those things. Because, after all, A Day in One's Life, if you've probably seen it, before it got removed because of all the suspicion that I was gonna go through. Because, after all, that was released before the controversy surrounding the blackout period came to an end in June 2018. And this was in April 2017, just over a year before then, when A Day in One's Life had pretty much made its release to the world. So, again, for the time that it had been out, until the blackout period came to an end, A Day in One's Life basically featured a 2015 GMC. That's basically the vehicle that I used then. Even though I never actually used it, I basically had it in as a cameo, signifying that it was in fact the vehicle that I had used. But in terms of Inhospitality, that was just another problem of mine that I pretty much ran into, trying to find a different car out there. But thankfully I did find a few, thanks to some parts of my family having bought newer vehicles within the past couple years. So that was pretty much a good way to pretty much help on what could be later feature film projects of mine out there. For Inhospitality, I had a couple choices out there, but there were in fact only 2 that I pretty much wanted to use for the film itself, especially for the first 20-30 minutes of it. There was either a 2018 Acura TLX that was modified and tuned, or there was a 2005 Lexus ES300. Those were basically the only 2 choices that I felt like I was going to use, because with Bolts of Intrigue, I had managed to use 4 vehicles that whole time. The 2001 Jeep Grand Cherokee Laredo, which is pretty much a vehicle that I've used a lot on the channel, along with the 2005 Toyota Corolla Liftback and a 2008 Toyota RAV4, which wasn't actually mine to begin with. It was somebody else's. It was Leah Groholski's vehicle, actually. But I did get permission to use it as a part of Bolts of Intrigue itself. So, that's 4 vehicles I pretty much managed to use. So, I pretty much used all 3 vehicles that I had out there on the lot, in the driveway pretty much, here in this house. So, I was not going to end up using any of those 3 vehicles for Inhospitality. So instead I went over to try and ask if I could use either the 2018 Acura or the 2005 Lexus that they have. And of course it took a little while, but basically speaking, I was not really able to use the 2018 Acura, but this was mostly because they had only just bought it a few months ago. So that was part of the reason why I wasn't really allowed to use it for some time. But by the time I was actually able to finally get permission from them, it was already kind of too late for all that. By that time, it was already January and February 2021, and, well, I can't really say that this was, I guess, a good thing that happened. But by that time, in late February 2021, just a month ago, pretty much, the 2005 Toyota Corolla liftback had basically, well, got into an accident. As you can see from this photo right here that was sent to me at the time of the accident, there it is. It's basically just demolished. It had a pretty big crumple zone as it turned out. So, I was kind of worried about what happened with whoever drove that vehicle at the time. So, basically speaking, even though I had already used the 2005 Toyota Corolla as part of Bolts of Intrigue at the time, it's safe to say that it's a goner. I would no longer be able to use it even if I did get the chance to use it even as a cameo appearance of some sort. I would not have been able to use it, like, at all, considering the fact that it was all the way out in Milwaukee, and also because, well, by now, it's pretty much scrapped. And I guess all of its spare parts, whatever's left intact, is probably being used as, like, donor pieces to whoever could use them as part of their, like, project build of some sort. So, that's just the end of that. The 2005 Toyota Corolla is just out of commission, pretty much. But there are some good news that pretty much revolved around that. We were actually able to get our hands on the 2005 Lexus. That's right. We finally got one of the 2 cars that I was hoping to use for Inhospitality. And although I was actually wanting to use the 2018 Acura TLX, I guess I just have to go ahead and use the 2005 Lexus. So, that's pretty much what that is. So, basically speaking, that's the vehicle of mine that I have to use for this. But considering all the time that I had left, I had less than a month to continue my work on with it. But even with all that time that I had basically spent trying to work on all that stuff, I was putting in a lot of good continuous effort to it all. But the main thing is that, well, that was the controversy that I really wanted to have averted as soon as possible so I could continue my work with it without having any more delays. Because, well, that's just what that's about. Not to mention the houses that I used. As you know, I'm currently in this house right here, which you've probably seen continuous times. It has a deck on the back, it has chairs on the front, it has a driveway that can fit 4 cars. So of course, this is basically the house that I had also used in Nerf Secret Reveal Bolts of Intrigue. So, houses seem to be another standard that I have alongside cars. So, vehicles and houses are pretty much parts of the setting that I have interchanged with every new feature film project that I use. And so, you might be wondering, what house am I trying to use for Inhospitality? Well, here's a good answer. This one. Yeah. This is basically the house that I'm hoping to use as basically the starting sequence, like the first 10-15 minutes of the film itself. After, well, all the stuff at the beginning basically takes place. The montage of cars that pass by with all those shots that happen, all those drive-by scenes and the like. That's basically the montage that I have as an obligatory portion to every new feature film project of mine, and it's pretty much happened since day one. So it's a tradition that I have right there, and like I said, alongside the first-person perspective, as well as the tradition of, well, having new houses and cars or trucks to use as parts of, well, the setting and the like that accompany the plot of new feature film projects of mine that I have every now and then. Those are basically the traditional values, the aspects, and the tropes that accompany every feature film project surrounding Kaiju Force Neo related media. So, this house, this car, and well, pretty much this outfit, as you can see right here, this is basically all the material that I wanted to get started with work on Inhospitality as a whole. So those are the three details right there that were prime in determining what was I going to do with the feature film project itself. But of course there's one thing that I might as well highlight that seems to be the core of it all. The woods in the middle of winter. Because as you know, this does take place in the start of 2019, where Elias Rumsfeld is 25 going on 26 and basically has an emergency meeting very early in the morning. So Rumsfeld goes on in to scramble to get stuff ready and to drive on out there to all the way out to Green Bay, basically, because that's where Rumsfeld works, pretty much. So, of course, it takes place in a town that's nearby, but of course the majority of filming takes place in Menominee Falls, Germantown, and Ridgefield for the most part. So, it may not actually take place there, but of course, this little township that's near Green Bay is basically just the setting where it takes place. Even though the filming basically takes place in, well, Germantown, Menominee Falls, Ridgefield, and sometimes other areas as well. But anyways, I suppose right now would be a good time to move on to the other two reasons why all of this pretty much came down to not very much. The third reason, darn it. The third reason for all of this is simply because of the pandemic. Enough said, pretty much. I guess I don't need to go into very much detail on that anymore because, wow, it's quite obvious what it's all coming down to and what it's pretty much going to lead to in the future. So, let's just go ahead and move on to the fourth and final reason. The fact is that most of this very month in particular, March 2021, has pretty much been an early sign of spring. I mean, it only makes sense given to the fact that, well, right now it is just past the vernal equinox, but even before then, a lot of the temperatures started rising up, and as a result, there was a lot of snow loss that we had gotten. So much so that it only took a couple weeks just for most of the snow itself to pretty much be gone. And, well, aside from maybe a few patches, well, that's pretty much just how it all ended. Eventually, we did start getting some more snow, but it was very brief. It only lasted for a couple days. And even throughout that time that I had spent when the snow was still around before March even came about, I still had kind of a few problems trying to gauge whether or not I'd be able to have time to be able to get my production done. And once again, we do have access to the Lexus ES 300 right now, but even with that in mind, it still is under a lot of use because of, well, we lost the Toyota, so we're still back to 3 vehicles, but sooner or later, there's a good time that I will be able to have, well, another vehicle at access. There, of course, will be another brand new vehicle that we'll be picking up at some point, but the thing is that right now, I kind of have limited access at this point. Mostly because of it being gone throughout most of the day. And because there's only so much daylight that I have out here these days, it's also kind of hindering my ability to work. So, I don't necessarily have the right kind of equipment to be ready for the night itself, and also to have good lighting and all that good stuff. So, that's another thing that tends to ruin the production overall. But other than all that, that's just 4 reasons right there. They're all relevant to the subject, but I feel like that there really shouldn't have been any excuse whether or not I was able to work on this stuff. But overall, the production of Inhospitality has been somewhat limited throughout these last few months, and even more so given to the fact that I had to remove a ton of footage from the original project, and I only had 9 minutes to begin with. So that meant I had little more than 80 minutes to basically put everything together. And even though it was easy for me to basically do both the, well, starting segments, which include the montage with the cards and the title screen and all that good stuff, as well as the credits, and not to mention the end credits scene, those alone only managed to take up nearly 10 full minutes. So that only meant that the rest of the footage that I had to put together, it had to have been done. But there actually were a few times where I was able to get some pretty long shots. At one point, I managed to get a shot that lasted for just over 10 minutes, and then a couple other times there were shots that I had that were similar in length to that. But of course, we can't forget that there was one single shot that I managed to get that was just under 20 minutes in length. Yeah. I feel like I could give 1917 a run for its money because that whole film is just one take from start to finish. So, that right there, I feel like I could be, well, attempting to shatter personal records based on how I can get one shot based, well, scenes or parts taken care of. But the most important thing of all here is the fact that it's now past March 25th, 2021, the date when I originally scheduled to have this uploaded to the channel. But right now, for the film that it is, I don't really know what else to say about it. I guess I don't need to say anything about it, because, well, this is yet another occasion where I got troubles with my production, and I'm basically just sitting down trying to ponder exactly what else to pretty much do with it. Well, I can at least point out that for the time period that this thing was in production, I was really able to get some good ideas here and there, and I was also able to pitch in some pretty good parts that probably would have played out, including a part where I face planted myself into a river after tripping over a log, a part where a stray rabid pit bull comes out and rips a coat off my potty, and a part where I basically end up losing both my boots and suffer from amnesia because of the hypothermia I'm getting while I'm out there. Of course, many of these things I tried to put into place, but those I've also had problems with. Lots of them, as a matter of fact. With the pit bull part, well, I do know a lot of people that have their own pit bulls, but trying to get permission to use them for some time in my production was a little, I guess, difficult to pull off, mostly because I can't really get into contact with them with all this new stuff that's been developing. And at the same time, I seem to be not having a lot of assistance around. And that's mostly because of all the school stuff that's just so important to us, all the things that are also outside of school, and the many things that also surround it overall. I mean, sure, we can pitch in time for that, but I'm pretty sure that it wouldn't kill to have 5 minutes even to spend some time donating a little money to my production. But that's basically just me going forward, trying to pitch in what Nerf Secret Reveal Bolts of Intrigue basically had in mind, because that was such a big budget that I spent. Though speaking of the budget, I feel like that I've spent even less money than I had spent on Nerf Secret Reveal Bolts of Intrigue, because, well, tens of thousands of dollars I tend to put together worth of stuff, items, cars, houses, and all that good stuff. It just basically comes down to, how do I use this money to the best of my advantage? Well, I guess it's more about how the production basically takes place and not just about how the money is pitched in altogether. With Kaiju Force Neo related productions that I have here going forward, I'm pretty much putting myself out there on the line, and I'm really getting a lot of stuff over the edge just so I can at least make my goals possible. So, today on March 29th, 2021, I make it clear that even though Inhospitality was not the kind of project I really hoped to see shine through on the channel on that day and age, at a time like this where we're really going to be having a lot of ends to meet and also tons of other things to put together, there comes times where we all have to pitch in, help each other out, and give ourselves a little gratitude along the way. So I can't really be sure exactly if I'm actually going to continue my work on Inhospitality at this point, because there really are going to be a lot of complications going forward, and there's also a good chance that some of this stuff I might actually have to sell off just to make ends meet. So this was at least a graduous attempt that I pretty much put together, and this was also a time where I have to be honest here. It really wasn't what I hoped to take place. So, I guess that's pretty much going to cut it for today. And I'm starting to get a little sick of all these little things that I say before the outro here, but that's something else I might have to work on as well, because it's really going to get old over time. But if you want to see more go down on my channel, then make sure that you like, subscribe, comment, follow me on social media, and stay on the Hollywood side.